You're standing on the corner of 42nd Street and 7th Avenue, Times Square. The world feels normal. Then a flash, brighter than the sun. For a split second, time stops. At 550 meters above Times Square, the Tsar Bomba detonates. A 50-megaton blast, the largest nuclear explosion in human history. In 0.5 seconds, you're gone, vaporized, along with everything you ever knew. This is Tsar Bomba, the most powerful nuclear weapon ever detonated. 50 megatons. That's 3,500 times more powerful than Hiroshima. But let's put that into perspective. If Hiroshima leveled a city block, Tsar Bomba erases the entire island of Manhattan in under a second. Its fireball is wider than Central Park is long. Its mushroom cloud towers 40 miles high. That's above where passenger jets fly. The Shockwave circled the Earth. Twice. People in Finland and Alaska felt the blast, from a test in the Arctic. No nation would realistically drop something this massive. But if they did, just once, this is what it would look like. At detonation, a fireball nearly 4 miles wide expands in milliseconds. Midtown Manhattan, vaporized. Inside this zone, nothing survives. Not buildings, not bodies, not bones. Everything is gone, turned to gas. Then comes the thermal radiation, traveling at the speed of light. Fires ignite 20, 30 miles away. Curtains burn in Brooklyn. Rooftops catch fire in Queens. Forests in New Jersey begin to smolder. A split second later, the air blast arrives. Over 300 square miles are hammered with hurricane-force winds. Entire neighborhoods collapse like paper. Bridges twist. Subways cave in. Skyscrapers snap like matchsticks. 10 seconds later, the sound finally hits. A thunderclap louder than anything on Earth. And then, the wall of wind. From Midtown to miles beyond, this isn't just destruction, it's total erasure. Times Square, gone. Theaters, billboards, towers, nothing left but a crater of burning glass and molten steel. The Empire State Building, vaporized. The Chrysler Building, obliterated. Grand Central Terminal, flattened in 2 seconds. From 59th Street to Wall Street, every structure is burning or collapsing. The financial district's glass towers shatter like crystal. Brooklyn Bridge, struck by 500-mile-per-hour winds. Its suspension cables whip and snap. The deck peels apart. Dozens fall with it. 6 miles from the blast, Lady Liberty buckles under the pressure, her torch still raised, even as she falls. Midtown Manhattan no longer. Before you react, the air blast hits. Traveling at hundreds of miles per hour, the ornate ceiling above you collapses. Shock waves don't just knock things over, they compress the air so violently it becomes lethal. Organs rupture, bones break, glass becomes shrapnel. You're on the 1 train platform below Times Square. You don't see the flash, but milliseconds later, the station collapses. Pressure enters the tunnels and ricochets like a piston. Even underground, the overpressure is fatal. Why? A 50-megaton air burst delivers over 20 psi of pressure within the first mile, enough to pulverize reinforced concrete. Underground structures offer some shielding, but if they're within that high-pressure zone, they fail catastrophically. Here you might think you're safe. Open space, no skyscrapers, but the danger is thermal. Third-degree burns occur instantly at this range. The heat flash, infrared radiation, ignites trees, clothing, and exposed skin, Even indoors, anyone near a window is vulnerable. Glass doesn't block infrared. Brooklyn Bridge, 5 miles out. Rush hour traffic. Drivers see the fireball swelling above the skyline. Seconds later, intense heat. Then the blast wave arrives. The Brooklyn Bridge suspension system can't withstand a 500+ mile-per-hour wind wall. Suspension cables snap. The deck heaves. Vehicles are thrown like toys. Here, survival depends on angle, cover, and distance from the structural collapse. Out to 8 miles, most buildings collapse or burn. Between 8 and 20 miles, many structures stand, but windows are blown out, and fire and radiation now become the next threats. Remember, thermal radiation is instant. The shockwave follows a few seconds later. Radiation sickness comes hours later. Each effect has its own speed and survival window. In all, 7.6 million dead, 4.2 million injured, not because they made mistakes, but because in a city this dense there is no warning and no shelter from the core effects. Your survival depends on 3 things: distance, shielding, and timing. In a nuclear blast, seconds mean everything. The explosion is over in seconds, but the real killer, the one most people never see coming, is just beginning. This is the fallout plume, formed from vaporized buildings, dirt, vehicles, and human remains, sucked into the fireball and fused with radioactive isotopes. As the cloud rises to over 40 miles, it begins to cool. The radioactive material condenses into particles, dust, ash, even raindrops, and starts falling back to Earth. Fallout isn't random. It follows the wind. With typical westerlies, radioactive ash begins drifting over Queens, Long Island, Connecticut. Within an hour, deadly particles are raining down 50 miles away. You can't see it. You can't smell it. But it's already on your skin, in your lungs, and coating your food and water. Here's the key. Fallout danger comes from exposure. Radiation weakens over time and distance, but in the first 48 hours, it's lethal. Radiation follows the rule of 7. Every 7-fold increase in time reduces exposure by a factor of 10. That's why surviving fallout is about staying shielded and staying put. 1 hour after blast, exposure outside equals fatal in minutes. 7 hours later, 10 times less radiation. 48 hours later, 100 times less radiation. Many areas become survivable. A concrete basement can cut exposure by 90%. A car, almost no protection. Staying in place, away from windows, is your best chance, not fleeing. Wind changes can redirect the plume. Areas that thought they were safe may suddenly fall into the contamination zone. Fallout maps are not static. They shift by the hour. Fallout doesn't fall like snow. It sticks to grass, to water, to skin. Without decontamination, it keeps emitting radiation for days. The most dangerous misconception? That if you survive the blast, you're safe. The truth is, most nuclear deaths happen after the explosion, from radiation. Would you know where to shelter? Could your home block radiation? Comment below if you know the safest spot in your house right now. In a nuclear event, your instincts can get you killed. Let's break down 3 deadly misconceptions people still believe, and what you should actually do. Misconception number 1. If you weren't in the blast zone, you're safe. The biggest danger isn't always the explosion, it's what follows. Fallout can travel hundreds of miles depending on the wind. You could be 50 miles away and still absorb a lethal dose of radiation, just by stepping outside. Fallout particles are tiny, airborne, and radioactive. They don't just fall near the blast. They rise into the stratosphere and drift with the jet stream. Misconception number 2. If I feel fine, I'm probably okay. Radiation doesn't burn like fire. You can absorb a fatal dose and feel nothing for hours. Then, sudden vomiting, confusion, internal bleeding. Radiation damage occurs at the cellular level. Your body may not react for hours or days, and by the time symptoms show, it's often too late to reverse. Would the place you're in right now protect you? If you had 60 seconds to find shelter, where would you go? In a nuclear disaster, knowledge isn't power, it's survival. If you do the wrong thing in the first 5 minutes, there's no second.
Then, water. New York relies on a 7,000-mile network of aging water mains, many over a century old. The shockwave shatters these pipes like glass. Pressure drops to zero. Without pumps or intact mains, hydrants run dry. Fires rage unchecked. Communications vanish. Cell towers are destroyed. Fiber optic cables melt or snap. Radio repeaters fail. 911 is silent. No emergency calls go out, and no coordinated response can come in. Subways? Most tunnels are crushed near the blast. Others flood as fire mains break and water backs up. Above ground, roads are impassable, blocked by rubble, burning cars, and collapsed overpasses. Bridges like the Queensboro and Manhattan are either down or too unstable to cross. Hospitals in the city center are gone. Others on the edge are without power, running water, or medical supplies. There are no helicopters, no ambulances, just overwhelmed staff trying to keep people alive with flashlights and hope. Every thread that makes a modern city function — power, water, communications, transport, emergency care — snaps in under an hour. 8:13 a.m. The Tsar Bomba detonates 550 meters above Times Square. A flash, brighter than the sun, lights up the entire tri-state area. Midtown vanishes inside a 3.5-mile-wide fireball. In less than 2 seconds, over 1 million people are dead. 8:10 a.m. The shockwave hits. Winds over 500 miles per hour flatten buildings across a 10-mile radius. Every window from Lower Manhattan to Hoboken and Queens is blown inward. The Brooklyn Bridge cables snap. Grand Central collapses. 8:15. Communications fail. Cell towers are gone. Power grid surges and collapses. Subways halt mid-tunnel. No one knows what's happened, only that everything's on fire. 8:30. Fallout begins drifting east. Dark radioactive dust starts falling over Nassau County. Anyone still outside, unaware of the danger, begins accumulating radiation exposure with every breath. 9 outer hospitals flood with casualties: burns, glass lacerations, blast trauma. But most lack electricity, water, or enough staff to respond. Emergency systems are paralyzed. 10 o'clock, fallout alerts go out in scattered areas. Some radios, some sirens, some word of mouth. But panic spreads faster than instructions. People flee in all directions, often straight into the path of the plume. 8:13 p.m. 12 hours later, fires are still burning. Smoke chokes the atmosphere, blocking the stars. Survivors on the fringes have no food, no water, no way to know where to go. Emergency responders are still setting up staging zones, 30 miles away. Next morning, 24 hours in, the dead number in the millions. The living are traumatized, scattered, and exposed. Fallout has settled over hundreds of square miles. The government faces the greatest urban crisis in human history. One day later, New York is no longer a city. It's a wound in the earth. The destruction isn't abstract, it's surgical, brutal, and painfully specific. Times Square is gone in less than half a second. The blast reaches over 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than the surface of the sun. Nothing remains. The blast lasted seconds, but the aftermath will last decades. By day 1, there are no functioning hospitals within 30 miles. Burn victims die without treatment. People in the fallout path suffer nausea, confusion, vomiting, symptoms of acute radiation poisoning. For many, it's too late. Day 3, the refugee crisis begins. Over 10 million people attempt to flee the metro area. Roads are impassable, airports are gone, train lines are dead, triage centers overflow, clean water and antibiotics run out in hours. Martial law is declared across the Northeast. Federal aid is slow. Helicopters can't land. Bridges are gone. Radiation zones still hot. National Guard troops operate in hazmat suits. Looting, panic, and misinformation spread faster than relief. The financial impact is global. With Manhattan destroyed, the U.S. loses its economic nerve center. Stock markets crash, supply chains fracture, insurance systems collapse under the weight of claims. The ripple spreads to every country on Earth. A year later, parts of the city are still sealed off. Soil and groundwater remain toxic. Radiation persists in pockets across Queens, Staten Island, and the Bronx. Reconstruction begins, but slowly. Many never return. The city's cultural identity is gone. The skyline will never be the same. What if it wasn't New York? What if it was yours? Where would you be? At work? On the train? Dropping off your kids? Would your city survive better or worse?